So if you think Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility is, like, just about polite tea parties and empire waist dresses and, swooning romances...
Right. Usual assumptions.
Yeah, exactly. If that's what you think, you have basically been fooled by centuries of really good PR.
Oh, absolutely.
Because today we are stripping all of that lace and the ballroom dances away. We are looking at a text that is, at its core, this brutal, ruthless survival guide.
I mean, it's a guide for a society where women essentially had to act like corporate raiders just to, avoid starvation.
It's wild, and we're analyzing this masterpiece that was originally published in 1811 anonymously. It was just credited as, quote, a novel by a lady.
Which is perhaps the most magnificent understatement in literary history, honestly.
Right.
Because that anonymous lady was quietly staging this profound, deeply philosophical debate about epistemology, ethics, and, human survival under the crushing weight of early capitalism.
Yeah, and to guide us through this absolute tragicomedy of a novel, we have a really fascinating, truly global stack of sources today.
A great stack.
Yeah. We have this passionate, highly entertaining, very modern YouTube book review by an author named Brian Lee Durfee.
His perspective is great.
It is. And then we have two incredibly comprehensive analytical summaries. One is in Tamil and the other is in Arabic.
Which is where things get really interesting philosophically.
Exactly, because providing a totally unique angle, we also have the foreword and the opening chapters of an Arabic audiobook translation of the novel.
It is just a phenomenal set of perspectives because it forces us to look at a profoundly English text through lenses that are completely outside of the English cultural bubble.
Right.
When you apply Tema and Arabic analytical frameworks to 19th century British society, the invisible structures of that society suddenly become blaringly obvious.
Which is exactly our mission for you today as we dive into this. We want to explore that eternal philosophical clash between reason and emotion, or, sense and sensibility.
The great divide.
Yeah. And we want to examine how brutal societal structures basically force these two ideologies to just violently collide.
The central question really being, how do you survive a rigged system without losing your soul?
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
Do you trust the cold, hard calculus of your rational mind? Or do you, surrender to the overwhelming, undeniable reality of your emotional passions?
Right. And we're going to see how people rationalize absolutely terrible behavior just to keep their place in the social hierarchy.
Always a timely toss.
So timely. Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to talk about how people perceive society versus what society actually is, I want to start with a piece of our source material that completely through me.
Oh, I know exactly which one you're talking about.
It's so good. It is the foreword from the Arabic audiobook translation.
Yes.
This was written by a translator named Farouk Beirut. He wrote it in March of 1968, and he is reflecting on a trip he took to Britain the year before in February of 1967.
His account is just a masterpiece of shattered illusions.
It's completely shattered.
It really perfectly sets the philosophical stage for Austen's work, I think.
The guy is completely devastated. I mean, he explains that through his university studies of English literature, he had built up this magnificent image of the British people in his head.
Right, because he was reading the greats.
Yeah, he had been reading Austen, Shakespeare, the great romantics, and because of this literature, he expected the actual everyday British people he met on the street to possess these exact, noble, elevated, morally perfect characteristics.
He essentially expected to step off the plane in London and be greeted by a nation of philosopher kings.
Right.
He anticipated, paragons of virtue, titans of intellect, people who spoke in perfectly structured prose and lived their lives according to the absolute highest moral dictates.
But then he actually gets there. He interacts with real people in 1967 London.
And reality hits.
Hard. The reality is so severely lacking, so completely ordinary and flawed, that he goes into this kind of existential shock.
It's palpable in his writing.
He literally asks himself in the foreword, how did a people with these traits, these everyday, messy, selfish characteristics, ever manage to build a global empire?
Yeah.
How did they colonize his own country? He basically writes that his own people are more intelligent, they have their morals, they're braver.
And he says he wishes every Arab could visit Britain just to see the mundane reality.
Yes, just to feel the same pain of shattered illusions that he felt. It's wild.
The irony is so rich here, though, particularly because of the specific author he was translating. Farouk Beirut fell into a classic epistemological trap.
Okay, an epistemological trap. Let's unpack that term for a second, because it sounds really dense, but it's something we literally do all the time.
Absolutely. So epistemology is the study of how we know what we know. And the trap here is mistaking the artistic artifact of a culture for the entirety of the culture itself.
Oh, interesting.
Think of it like a map versus the territory. If you study a beautifully illustrated, highly stylized map of a mountain, you might arrive at the actual mountain expecting it to be made of parchment and ink.
Right, with like giant compass roses painted on the ground or something.
Exactly. Beirut looked at the highest artistic achievements of a culture and assumed those achievements were documentary evidence of everyday life.
Oh, I see.
He assumed that because the British produced high art, they must automatically be highly evolved beings.
Which is so funny to me, because if he was deeply studying Jane Austen, he should have seen the warning signs.
Right. She's practically screaming it at him.
Austen wasn't painting a utopian picture of perfect, noble people at all. She was writing this brutal, microscopic critique of how foolish and selfish and pragmatic people actually are.
She was a satirist masquerading as a romance novelist.
Totally.
The Tamil analytical summary we have actually points this out brilliantly.
Oh, right, the Tamil source.
Yeah, because in Tamil literary traditions, there is a very deep understanding of the tension between rigid caste or societal expectations and the messy reality of human desire.
That makes perfect sense.
The Tamil analyst notes that Austen's society is just as stratified. It's just as obsessed with saving face and maintaining external purity, while completely hiding internal corruption.
Austen is exposing a society driven not by nobility, but by survival and hypocrisy and incredibly rigid social decorum.
Exactly.
It makes me think of a modern scenario to really put you in Beirut's shoes. Imagine a historian like 200 years from now in the 23rd century.
Okay.
They dig up a server farm and somehow manage to reconstruct a highly curated 21st century social media feed. Let's say a top-tier lifestyle influencer's Instagram page.
Oh, that is a fascinating parallel.
Yeah.
What conclusions would that future historian draw?
Right, they would look at all these perfectly filtered sunset photos, the immaculate beige kitchens, the smiling, flawless families, and matching linen outfits.
The inspirational quotes about living your authentic truth.
Yes, and they would write a thesis saying, quote, "The people of the early 21st century lived entirely flawless, aesthetic, morally elevated lives."
They were enlightened beings of pure light, mindfulness, and macrobiotic diets.
Exactly. And then theoretically, they invent a time machine, travel back to a random Tuesday morning in 2024.
And they see people screaming in traffic.
Right? Yeah, doom scrolling in their pajamas, arguing with strangers on the internet, and eating cold pizza over the sink.
The illusion shatters completely.
Farouk Beirut looked at the curated social media feed of 19th century British literature and mistook the ideal for the reality.
He really did.
But Austen's whole point is that underneath the fancy coats, the polite bows, and the sweeping estates, human nature is messy. It's greedy. It is desperately trying to secure resources.
And that scramble for resources brings us to the very foundation of the story. Really.
It does.
If we want to understand the philosophical clash between reason and emotion, we first have to understand the physical, unyielding economic reality that forces that clash to happen.
We have to look at the brutal economics of 19th century British society.
Precisely.
So let's talk about the inciting incident of Sense and Sensibility, because it is a masterclass in economic determinism.
And economic determinism is basically the idea that the financial structures of a society dictate the behavior, the morality, and the very destinies of the individuals within it.
You can't escape the math.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The characters in this novel do not operate in a vacuum of free will. They operate within a highly restrictive financial page.
Okay, here is the setup. We have the Dashwood family, Mr. and Mrs. Dashwood and their 3 daughters.
Right.
There's Elinor, who is 19, Marianne, who is 17, and Margaret, who is 13. They live on this beautiful, sprawling, wealthy estate called Norland Park.
But the crucial detail here is that they do not own Norland Park.
Right.
They are essentially long-term guests. The estate belongs to Mr. Dashwood's wealthy, elderly bachelor uncle.
And then the uncle dies. And this is where the patriarchal trap just snaps shut on these women.
It's devastating.
The uncle leaves the entire Norland estate, not to Mr. Dashwood to use as he sees fit, but explicitly tied to Mr. Dashwood's son from a previous marriage, a man named John.
And to John's 4-year-old son, Harry.
Yes.
This is the mechanism of primogeniture and the patriarchal structure of inheritance just laid bare.
It's
Wealth, property, power. They are bequeathed almost exclusively along male lines to keep estates intact. The female characters are systematically excluded from the primary mechanisms of wealth generation and retention.
They are legally barred from the game.
Entirely.
It is absolutely staggering when you look at the math. Mr. Dashwood himself only had 7,000 pounds to his name because his first wife's massive fortune was entirely locked up legally for her son, John.
Right. The current wife and daughters see none of that.
So when the elderly uncle dies, he leaves the women a mere 1,000 pounds each as a token gesture.
And compounding the tragedy, Mr. Dashwood dies just a year after the uncle.
So Mrs. Dashwood and her 3 daughters are left with a grand total of 10,000 pounds between them.
Which is nothing in their world.
Right. To give you some context from the sources, that generates about 500 pounds a year in interest to live on for 4 adult women.
And meanwhile, John Dashwood, who was already wealthy from his own mother, now gets the entire Norland estate.
And his 4-year-old son gets the rest of the uncle's fortune.
As the Durfee Review points out so astutely, this is a society where women have zero economic or political power.
Zero.
Their entire existence, as the back of his book cover summarizes, is dedicated to the, quote, serious business of contriving material security.
I want to pause on that phrase because it is brilliant. The serious business of contriving material security.
It's incredibly stark.
It takes all the romance right out of the ballroom. It frames their existence not as a fairy tale waiting for a prince, but as a corporate strategy.
A corporate strategy where the only asset you have to leverage is yourself.
Right.
Your manners, your accomplishments, your appearance, your reputation.
But before we get to the women's strategy for survival, we really need to look at the men who hold the power. We need to look at John Dashwood and his wife, Fanny.
Oh, yes.
This is essential.
Because the breakdown of John and Fanny's negotiation regarding the inheritance, which the Arabic audiobook source highlights beautifully, is one of the most chilling, brilliant, psychological dissections of human nature I have ever encountered.
It's amazing. It is a masterclass in rationalized greed.
If we connect this to the broader philosophical themes, it is a profound exploration of cognitive dissonance.
How so?
Well, how do human beings commit terrible acts or acts of profound selfishness while maintaining the internal belief that they are fundamentally good, moral people?
The step-by-step devolution of John's morality is breathtaking. I want you to imagine this scene. Mr. Dashwood is on his deathbed. He calls his son John into the room.
A highly emotional moment.
And with his dying breath, he begs John to provide for his stepmother and his half-sisters because he knows they're being left with almost nothing.
And John promises. He is moved by the gravity of the moment. He makes a solemn, sacred vow to his dying father.
Now, the sources make a point to note that John isn't inherently evil. He isn't like a mustache-twirling villain.
No, Austen's villains rarely are.
Right. He's just emotionally tepid, weak-willed, and naturally a bit selfish. So initially, walking out of that deathbed room, he thinks, I'm going to be generous. I will give them 3,000 pounds.
That would be 1,000 for each sister.
A very solid, life-changing amount of capital that would secure their futures forever.
It would allow them to live comfortably and give them a baseline of independence in the marriage market. But then, enter his wife, Fanny Dashwood.
Fanny Dashwood. She is described in the sources as narrow-minded, fiercely protective of her own, and intensely selfish.
A terrifying combination.
And her sheer audacity is wild. The moment the funeral is over, she packs up her family, her kids, and her servants and moves them right into Norland Park without even giving her grieving mother-in-law any notice.
It's shocking.
It is a hostile takeover of the house.
Which, in the context of 19th century manners, is a complete lack of decorum. It is almost a form of psychological violence to disregard the mourning period of the widow in such a blatant way.
But the real violence is what she does to John's conscience. John sits down with Fanny and tells her his plan. He says, I promised my father, I'm going to give them 3,000 pounds.
And Fanny immediately goes to work. She begins the systematic dismantling of his moral obligation.
And she is so smart about it. She doesn't just say, no, keep the money, I want to be rich.
Right, because that would make him feel bad.
Exactly. If she did that, John would feel like a bad person for agreeing. Instead, she frames it as a moral imperative to not give them the money. She attacks his sense of paternal duty.
It's insidious.
She says, how can you rob your own child? Your sweet 4-year-old son, Harry. If you give away 3,000 pounds of the estate, you are practically throwing our child into the abyss of poverty.
The mathematical absurdity of this is glaring, given the immense generational wealth of the Norland estate.
It's laughable.
But she isn't appealing to math. She is weaponizing his paternal instinct to justify economic hoarding. She shifts the moral axis so that keeping the money becomes the quote-unquote responsible thing to do.
It's incredible manipulation. So John, feeling a bit defensive, says, okay, you're right. 3,000 is too much to take from Harry. What if we just give them 500 pounds each?
That's 1,500 total. Surely we can spare that from the estate.
Notice the psychology of the anchor pricing here. He has already halved his solemn deathbed promise, yet because Fanny set the baseline at 0, he feels entirely justified and generous offering 1,500.
Oh, it's brilliant.
But Fanny isn't done. She says 500 pounds each. That is still a massive fortune. What do 4 women need with that much money?
They'll have 10,000 pounds of their own anyway.
Right. She says if they live together, they can live very cheaply. They don't need a carriage. They won't be hosting expensive friends. Why don't we just give them a yearly annuity, say 100 pounds a year? That's plenty.
This is a critical shift, moving from a lump sum of capital to a controlled drip feed allowance.
It totally changes things.
It shifts the power dynamic completely. Capital provides independence. An annuity keeps the women perpetually dependent on John and Fanny's goodwill.
But even that level of control is too generous for Fanny.
Of course it is.
She pauses, rethinks it, and tells John, you know what? An annuity. That ties us down. What if we have a bad financial year? What if we can't afford the 100 pounds?
It's too risky for us.
Yeah. She says we shouldn't commit to anything permanent. What if, instead of an annuity, we just give them a 50-pound gift every now and then when it's convenient for us?
The slow, insidious erosion of duty. From 3,000 pounds of capital to a 100-pound yearly commitment to an occasional optional 50-pound tip.
And then comes the final brilliant stroke of self-deception. John and Fanny talk themselves entirely out of giving them any money whatsoever.
How do they justify the absolute 0 to a man who literally swore an oath to a dying man?
They decide that Mr. Dashwood, in his final moments, didn't actually mean for John to give them cash.
No.
He just meant for John to be neighborly, to help them look for a smaller house, to maybe help them move their furniture, and occasionally send them a gift of fish or game from the estate when they have a surplus.
Fish and game.
Fish and game. They go from a 3,000-pound inheritance to occasional dead birds.
It is a masterpiece of rationalization.
And the most terrifying part is that John goes to sleep that night feeling like a wonderfully generous, upstanding son who has perfectly and honorably fulfilled his dying father's wishes.
This sequence raises such an important question about the nature of human morality, and it's something Austen excels at exposing.
Definitely.
Evil, or at least profound cruelty, rarely announces itself with a villainous laugh. It doesn't look in the mirror and declare itself wicked. It announces itself through perfectly logical-sounding rationalizations.
It's cognitive dissonance perfectly resolved through self-interest. Think about your own life. Have you ever done this?
We all have.
You start with grand moral intentions, like, I'm going to donate 10% of my income to charity this year. Then the car breaks down. Then you want to go on vacation.
Right.
And by December, you're dropping a $5 bill in a bucket outside the grocery store, and your brain tells you, I am a deeply philanthropic person.
That's so true.
The moment a moral duty costs us something real, we let our own selfishness justify doing absolutely nothing, and we believe our own lies.
And this brings us back to the philosophical core of the novel. The world these women are operating in is not a meritocracy.
No, not at all.
It is not a world where being good or smart or noble guarantees you safety, let alone happiness. It is a cold, capitalist reality wrapped in the polite manners and embroidered waistcoats of the gentleman and gentlewoman society.
Keeping up appearances is everything. If you smile while you steal your sister's inheritance, society applauds you as a gentleman.
Precisely. And the central tension of the novel becomes, how do you survive in a world like this without losing your mind or your soul?
Which leads us to the 2 distinct philosophical survival strategies embodied by the 2 older sisters, Elinor and Marianne.
Yes.
This is the beating intellectual heart of this deep dive. Classicism versus Romanticism, the philosophy of 2 sisters.
The core duality.
We have Elinor, who is 19, and Marianne, who is 17. And they represent 2 entirely opposing ways of processing reality.
The Arabic analysis provides a fantastic framework for this, actually, and it maps beautifully alongside the Tamil summary's thoughts on social duty. It maps the sisters onto the 2 major literary and philosophical schools that were clashing historically at the very moment the novel was written.
Let's break this down for the listener, starting with Elinor. The sources say she represents sense, mind, reason.
Yes.
The Arabic analysis calls her the embodiment of classicism. What does that actually mean for a 19-year-old girl in the 19th century?
Well, classicism, philosophically and aesthetically, values logic, reason, order, and societal responsibility. It looks back to the ordered rationality of the Enlightenment.
Okay.
A classicist believes that the individual must subjugate their wilder passions for the good of the community and the maintenance of balance.
The Durfee Review mentioned a phrase for Elinor that I want you to unpack: Augustinian detachment.
Oh, that is a wonderful concept. It echoes the philosophy of St. Augustine from the 4th century.
Right.
Augustine argued that human passions, grief, lust, anger, extreme joy, are chaotic and potentially destructive. To live a virtuous life, the rational mind must act as a sovereign ruler over these passions.
So you don't necessarily eliminate emotion, but you detach yourself enough to govern it. You evaluate the world empirically.
Exactly. So Elinor looks at the facts. She considers her duty to her family, the mathematical reality of their bank account, and she regulates her internal temperature accordingly.
That makes sense.
The Tamil summary likens this to a deep sense of familial dharma, the duty to uphold the family structure even at the cost of personal suffering.
Wow. Yes. But then we have Marianne. She represents sensibility, emotion, passion, impulse. She is the avatar of the Romantic age, which was just dawning in Europe.
And Romanticism is essentially a massive rebellion against the cold logic of classicism.
He's a total rejection of it.
The Romantics looked at the ordered, rational world of the Enlightenment and found it spiritually dead. They valued wild nature, deep, untamed passion, spontaneity, and high idealism.
So for a Romantic, truth isn't found in a ledger book, a social contract, or a polite conversation. Truth is found in the overwhelming intensity of individual feeling.
Exactly. So for Marianne, if you don't feel something with your entire soul, it isn't authentic. If you are calculating your response, you are lying.
Epistemologically, for the Romantic, emotion is evidence. The stronger the emotion, the truer the reality.
This is such a brilliant setup, because Austen isn't just writing an academic essay. She is taking these two philosophies and slamming them into a crisis to see how they perform.
And the crisis comes swiftly. Because of John and Fanny's rationalized greed, the women are evicted from Norland Park, the only home the girls have ever known.
This eviction scene is where we see the philosophies in action, in a sequence I like to call grieving by design.
Grieving by design, I like that.
When they are told they have to pack up and leave, Elinor is devastated. And her devastation is infinitely compounded by a massive secret.
Right.
In the months before leaving, she has fallen deeply in love with a man named Edward Ferrars.
And who is Edward Ferrars?
He is Fanny Dashwood's brother.
The brother of the woman who just stole their inheritance, psychologically manipulated their half-brother, and is actively kicking them out of their ancestral home.
It's an absolute nightmare scenario. Elinor loves him deeply. But how does she handle this devastating heartbreak and the trauma of the eviction?
She utilizes sense.
She leans into that Augustinian detachment. She suppresses her romantic feelings. She maintains absolute social decorum.
Right, she completely compartmentalizes her own agony so that she can be the practical, clear-headed support her mother desperately needs to handle the logistics of moving.
She subjugates the individual emotion for the collective good, the classicist approach.
But Marianne, and frankly, their mother, Mrs. Dashwood, who encourages this, they lean entirely into their grief. They represent sensibility.
The sources note that they actively sought out ways to deepen their sadness. They cultivated it.
They literally did. They would walk around the estate for hours, crying over every single tree, agonizing over every memory, purposely feeding the fire of their own misery.
It's so dramatic.
For Marianne, emotional restraint is a severe character flaw. If you aren't sobbing uncontrollably, you aren't really feeling the loss.
Right.
She looks at Elinor, calmly packing boxes and holding it together, and she concludes that Elinor is cold, unfeeling, and incapable of true love.
Which is the great tragedy of their misunderstanding. Marianne believes that expression equals authenticity. Elinor believes that restraint equals responsibility.
I want you, listening right now, to really think about this. When disaster strikes your life, when you lose a job, or you go through a terrible breakup, or you face a sudden health crisis, are you an Elinor or a Marianne?
It is the ultimate psychological litmus test.
Do you compartmentalize to survive? Do you immediately build a spreadsheet, make a plan, and ignore the searing pain until you are alone in your car and it's safe to feel it?
Or do you believe you must feel every ounce of the pain, right now, publicly, in all its messy, paralyzing glory, to be authentic to your own humanity?
What Austen is setting up here is a high-stakes laboratory experiment. She is taking these two opposing survival strategies, reason and emotion, and throwing them into the most ruthless, predatory environment imaginable.
The 19th century marriage market.
Oh, this brings us to Barton Cottage and the tragedy of the checklist. This is where the deep dive gets dark, but also incredibly funny in a very grim sort of way.
The tragicomedy, as Durfee called it.
So the women are forced to move to a new, much smaller home called Barton Cottage, which is on an estate called Barton Park, owned by some distant, slightly obnoxious relatives, the Middletons. And the moment they arrive, the stakes become a literal matter of life and death.
Because as we established through the inheritance math, they have no money, no property, and no legal power to earn either.
Right.
Their only path to survival, their only way to avoid ending up in a poorhouse or living on the charity of relatives who hate them, is to marry well.
I want to bring in a fascinating comparison from the Durfee YouTube review.
The Hardy comparison.
Yes. Durfee talks about reading this book alongside Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd, which is a male author writing about romance in a roughly similar historical context.
Right.
Durfee notes that from the male perspective, the Thomas Hardy perspective, finding a mate is brutally, comically simple.
The male characters in these texts are essentially looking for an aesthetically pleasing face.
Right. She's pretty, I want to marry her.
Right.
End of calculation. Because the men already have the money, the property, the societal standing, and the legal autonomy.
They have the supreme luxury of making purely aesthetic or purely romantic choices.
They hold the capital, therefore they hold the agency. A wealthy man can marry a penniless woman, and society might gossip, but his life doesn't materially change.
But for Austen's female characters, agency is a luxury they cannot afford.
Not at all.
When Elinor and Marianne arrive at Barton Cottage, they immediately begin scoping out the local men. And Durfee describes this scene so vividly, it doesn't sound like a romantic parlor scene.
It sounds like a military tribunal.
They're performing a ruthless risk assessment.
They are. They sit around analyzing these men with a fine-toothed comb. They're dissecting their clothing, mocking one guy for dressing too elaborately, criticizing another for dressing like a donkey.
Yes.
They are agonizing over their exact ages, desperately calculating their inherited wealth and social status.
Yeah.
They even speculate on what medical issues or diseases the men might have.
Is he too old? Will he die soon? Does he have a cough? Is he wealthy enough to compensate for the cough?
Right.
If he dies, does his estate go to his widow or to a male cousin?
It's brutal. And I want to push back on this for a second on behalf of the modern reader, because when you read this today, it sounds incredibly shallow.
It is very easy to judge them through a 21st century lens of romantic idealism.
It sounds like these women are just gold-digging gossips who care more about a guy's bank account and his tailor than they do about his soul or his personality.
But consider the alternative.
Right. It's not shallow. It is a desperate survival tactic. Think of it not as a date, but as a venture capital pitch, where the only asset you are legally allowed to leverage is your own personality.
Exactly.
If they marry a man with no money, they starve. If they marry a man who is rich but has a weak constitution, and he dies and leaves his estate to a male cousin because of primogeniture, they starve.
This is exactly why the Durfee Review calls everyone in the book a tragic clown.
Tragic comedy.
They are trapped in a circus not of their own making. The society demands they live by rigid, unforgiving expectations.
Yeah.
The grand tragedy of the novel, and this is a deeply philosophical tragedy, is that their internal ideals, their genuine desire for true love, for romance, for intellectual connection, are in direct, violent conflict with their external economic reality.
They are forced to be accountants of the heart. They have this massive checklist of financial, social, and medical requirements, and they have to run every man through this algorithm.
Right.
And then they cross their fingers and pray that somehow, against all astronomical odds, the guy who checks all the boxes will also magically be someone they can actually stand to be in a room with for the next 40 years.
And Austen is showing us how perfectly designed this system is to crush the human spirit. Which brings us to the collision.
The collision of ideals and reality.
What happens when these two carefully constructed philosophies, Elinor's sense and Marianne's sensibility, actually smash into the reality of this marketplace?
Let's look at how both sisters completely fail, despite their completely different approaches. And let's start with Marianne, the failure of pure emotion.
Marianne's arc is a terrifying cautionary tale about the absolute limits of romanticism.
It really is. So Marianne is at Barton Cottage, living her best hyper-romantic life. She is out walking in the rain because, of course, she is. She's a romantic. She loves wild nature and dramatic weather.
Naturally.
And she falls down a steep hill and twists her ankle.
A perfectly staged theatrical setup. The universe providing a canvas for her philosophy.
And who appears through the mist to rescue her. The dashing, handsome, impulsive John Willoughby. He scoops her up, carries her home, and instantly they are locked in a whirlwind romance.
He reads poetry. He loves music. He matches her intense emotional energy perfectly.
And true to her philosophy of sensibility, Marianne holds nothing back. She believes restraint is a lie, a form of societal cowardice.
So she flouts all the protective social conventions of the era.
She and Willoughby are openly affectionate. They write intimate letters to each other. They take unchaperoned carriage rides. She behaves as if they are already engaged, because in her heart, they are.
Let me ask you this, though. Is this really a grand philosophy, or is she just a naive, hormone-driven teenager making bad choices?
That is a crucial distinction. Austen certainly portrays her youth as a factor, but she elevates it to a philosophical stance.
Right.
Marianne consciously defends her actions using romantic logic. She argues that the intensity of her feeling is a guarantee of its moral rightness.
If she feels it this deeply, it cannot be wrong.
Exactly, and society's rules are therefore irrelevant. She thinks her passion is a shield.
But reality hits back. Hard.
One day, out of nowhere, Willoughby comes to the cottage looking deeply distressed and announces he has to leave for London immediately on business, and then he ghosted her.
He just vanishes. He doesn't write. He doesn't visit.
And Marianne is shattered, but she still clings to her ideal. She assumes there must be a noble, tragic reason for his absence. He must be locked in a tower, or fighting a duel, or suffering some terrible misunderstanding.
Later in the novel, the sisters get the opportunity to go to London with their gossipy older friend, Mrs. Jennings.
Yes.
Marianne is desperate to see Willoughby. She writes to him, gets no answer. Finally, they're at a crowded high society party, and she spots him across the room.
She runs up to him, expecting this grand, romantic, cinematic reunion.
And instead, she receives the exact opposite.
He brutally, coldly rejects her in public. He barely acknowledges her, speaks to her with icy formality, and literally turns his back on her to talk to someone else.
And then he follows up that public humiliation with a devastating letter.
The cruelest letter imaginable. He returns her letters, denies ever having any romantic feelings for her at all, and entirely gaslights her about their entire relationship.
So what happened? How does the ultimate romantic hero turn into an ice-cold corporate villain overnight?
The context reveals the truth, courtesy of two other characters. The older, steady Colonel Brandon and the incredibly well-informed Mrs. Jennings.
It turns out Willoughby was living a lie.
A huge lie.
He was entirely broke. He had a history of deeply immoral, cruel behavior, including seducing and abandoning a young ward of Colonel Brandon's, and because of his scandalous actions, his wealthy aunt disinherited him.
The economic reality violently asserts itself over the romantic fantasy.
Exactly. So Willoughby, the dashing, poetry-reading romantic, found himself facing poverty. And what did he do? He did the cold, ruthless math.
He needed cash to maintain his lifestyle.
So he abandoned the penniless Marianne and immediately got engaged to a woman named Miss Grey, a woman he does not love, purely because she had a massive fortune of 50,000 pounds.
Marianne's romantic ideal is utterly crushed by cold capitalism. The passion she thought was a magical shield turned out to be completely useless against a ledger book.
And the physical toll this realization takes on her is immense. Her philosophy didn't just fail her intellectually.
It nearly kills her biologically.
On the way home from London, they stop at an estate called Cleveland. Marianne, completely broken by the realization that her philosophy is a lie, wanders out into the freezing rain again at twilight.
Repeating the exact action that brought her Willoughby in the first place. But this time, the universe doesn't provide a hero, it provides consequences.
She catches a severe infectious fever. She collapses, becomes delirious, and she nearly dies of heartbreak and exposure.
Pure emotion, untethered from reason, literally almost puts her in the ground.
It is a stark condemnation of unbridled romanticism. If you live solely by passion, if you ignore the realities of the world you inhabit, you leave yourself entirely defenseless against a society that operates on profit and power.
So hearing that, you might think Jane Austen's message is simple. Like, Elinor was right. Reason wins. Be practical, keep your head down, and you'll be fine.
But Austen is far too brilliant for that.
way too brilliant, because we have to look at the betrayal of reason. We have to look at how Elinor's philosophy fails her just as spectacularly.
Because pure sense is just as vulnerable, though the prison it builds is invisible.
Right. So let's rewind to Elinor. She likes Edward Ferrars. The Doofy Review hilariously calls Edward a bit of a downer, a wet blanket, but notes that he has the potential for cash.
He's practical, steady, deeply honorable.
Maybe a little dull, but he aligns perfectly with Elinor's philosophy of sense.
They connect on an intellectual, restrained level. It's a courtship of shared values and mutual respect rather than fiery passion.
But then a massive plot twist drops on Elinor's head. Two young women come to visit Barton Park, the Steele sisters.
Right.
And one of them, Lucy Steele, pulls Elinor aside for a private chat and reveals a nuclear secret. Lucy has been secretly engaged to Edward Ferrars for an entire year.
A year. The entire time he was at Norland, the entire time he was forming this deep attachment to Elinor, he was legally, morally, and socially bound to someone else.
Now, think about how Marianne would react to this news. Screaming, crying, violently confronting Edward, causing a massive public scandal, demanding answers.
A very sensibility reaction.
But how does Elinor react?
She reacts with sense, with that Augustinian detachment we discussed earlier.
She binds herself to social duty. Lucy told her this in confidence, actually. Lucy told her this specifically as a manipulative power play to mark her territory, but Elinor respects the confidence.
She maintains absolute perfect decorum.
For months, she smiles, she pours the tea, she chats politely with Lucy, she covers for Edward, all while her heart is being ripped to shreds inside her chest.
She suffers in complete silence. Her philosophy dictates that maintaining the social order, avoiding scandal, and doing her duty is more important than expressing her individual pain.
But here's where Austen's critique of classicism is so brilliant. By suppressing her emotion completely, Elinor nearly isolates herself to death.
She is drowning in her own restraint.
She has no outlet, no support, because she refuses to burden anyone else with her pain.
And then, the ultimate irony occurs, proving that pure logic in a corrupt system is just as toxic. And this irony is delivered via Lucy Steele.
Ah, Lucy Steele. If Marianne is pure sensibility and Elinor is pure sense, what is Lucy?
Lucy is the true avatar of the 19th century marketplace. She is pure, ruthless, sociopathic pragmatism.
Eventually, the secret gets out. Edward's family, specifically his horrible, wealthy mother and his sister Fanny, the one who stole the Dashwood inheritance, they find out about his secret engagement to Lucy.
And because Lucy has no money, no aristocratic blood, and no status, the family is apoplectic.
They demand Edward break it off immediately. But Edward, who has a strong, perhaps overly rigid sense of honor, refuses to break his promise to Lucy, even though he no longer loves her.
So his mother disinherits him entirely.
She strips him of his massive fortune and gives the entire estate to his younger, foppish, arrogant brother, Robert.
Edward loses absolutely everything for the sake of his honor. He is cast out, penniless.
And what does Lucy do? The woman who just watched her fiancé sacrifice his entire life, his family, and his fortune to protect her honor.
She evaluates the new data and she pivots.
Instantly, with zero hesitation, she dumps Edward.
She realizes that Edward is now a bad investment and his brother Robert is now a highly capitalized asset.
She smoothly, flawlessly manipulates the arrogant Robert into falling for her, strokes his ego, and elopes with him instead. She marries the newly rich brother.
It is breathtakingly cynical, but it proves Austen's point perfectly. In a society built entirely on wealth and status, pure reason, when divorced from morality, honor, or genuine emotion, becomes mere mercenary calculation.
Right.
Lucy Steele is since stripped of all humanity. She's an algorithm optimizing for wealth.
So we have reached the ultimate philosophical impasse. What does this all mean?
Yeah.
We have Marianne literally dying of broken heart because she trusted emotion too much.
Yes.
We have Elinor suffocating in silent agony because she trusted reason too much. And we have people like Lucy Steele and John Willoughby treating human beings like disposable stock options.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly where we find Austen's ultimate philosophical synthesis.
The middle way.
The Arabic analysis highlights this beautifully, noting that while Austen clearly favored the rationality of classicism, she recognized that extreme adherence to either philosophy in isolation is deeply destructive.
You can't just be a cold, calculating brain in a jar, optimizing for survival, but you also can't just be a walking, exposed nerve reacting to every breeze. You have to find the middle way.
The synthesis. Learning from the other side.
And this brings us to the climax of the narrative.
Yeah.
Marianne is on her deathbed at Cleveland, burning with fever. And who shows up in the middle of the night, driving through a massive storm? Willoughby.
He comes seeking absolution.
He does. He arrives frantic and he speaks to Elinor. Because Marianne is too sick, he explains everything.
He confesses that he did truly love Marianne.
But he was weak, he was trapped by his own previous terrible choices, and his addiction to wealth forced him to marry Miss Grey. He is now incredibly rich, and he is utterly, completely miserable. He is living in a gilded hell.
And Elinor's reaction here is crucial. This is the moment her philosophy begins to shift. She doesn't just judge him with cold reason.
No. In the past, Elinor would have condemned him purely on the facts. But listening to his agony, she pities him.
She feels genuine emotion for him.
She realizes he is trapped in a cage of his own making, and she forgives him. Elinor allows herself to feel sensibility.
She integrates empathy into her logic. And when she tells Marianne the truth of this encounter later, as Marianne is slowly recovering, it acts as a catalyst for Marianne's own profound transformation.
Marianne realizes that her unbridled emotion, her selfish pursuit of her own passions, almost destroyed her family and literally cost her her life.
A hard lesson.
She looks at Elinor, she learns about Edward's secret engagement and how much Elinor suffered in silence to protect their mother, and Marianne realizes that Elinor's restraint, her quiet, agonizing endurance, was its own kind of deep, profound, heroic love.
Marianne learns sense. Elinor learns sensibility. They integrate the shadow parts of their philosophies.
They find balance, and the universe, or rather Jane Austen, as the authorial god of this universe, rewards them for this synthesis.
The resolution of the plot hinges entirely on this newfound balance.
Edward, now freed from the predatory Lucy Steele, is practically broke. He only has a small living as a clergyman. But Elinor doesn't care about the strict financial checklist anymore.
She has learned that pure economic pragmatism, the path of Lucy Steele, is a trap.
She allows her emotion to guide her, and when Edward finally proposes, she joyfully accepts. They don't have massive estates or carriages, but they have true affection, mutual respect, and enough sense to manage their small income and make it work.
And Marianne's resolution is perhaps even more profound and often misunderstood by modern readers who just want her to end up with a dashing bad boy.
Yes, Marianne, who dreamed of wild, fiery, destructive passion, learns the vital importance of practicality and a quieter, deeper, steadier kind of love. She marries Colonel Brandon.
The older, steady, pragmatic man who stood by her silently while she was dying. The man who actually rescued her when she was sick, not just when she twisted her ankle in a picturesque way.
Exactly. The man in the flannel waistcoat, as she once mocked him. She learns that true romance isn't always a handsome boy carrying you through the rain while quoting poetry.
Sometimes, true romance is a steady, honorable man holding your hand through a fever and making sure you don't die.
It is the ultimate triumph of the middle way, the synthesis of reason and emotion.
Beautifully said.
So, let's step back and summarize this incredible journey. We started with the translator Farouk Beirut in 1968 walking the streets of London, deeply disillusioned because he expected the British people to be the flawless, noble statues he imagined from their literature.
He failed to realize that Austen was writing a surgical critique of flawed humanity, not a celebration of perfect nobility. She was exposing the gap between what society pretends to be and what it actually is.
From there, we watched John Dashwood and his wife Fanny perform Olympic-level mental gymnastics to justify their own greed, proving that self-interest is the greatest rationalizer of all.
They showed us how easy it is to convince yourself you are a saint while acting like a monster.
We examined the brutal cage of the 19th century marriage market, where women, stripped of all economic agency by inheritance laws, were forced into the serious business of contriving material security, analyzing men like venture capital investments just to survive.
We watched the two sisters crash violently into this reality. Marianne nearly dying because she believed pure emotion could conquer a capitalist world, and Elinor nearly suffocating because she believed pure reason could suppress a breaking heart.
And finally, we saw them adapt. We saw them blend sense and sensibility, integrating logic and empathy to find a survivable, genuine happiness in a deeply compromised world.
As the Durfee Review stated, Austen shows us that we are all tragic clowns in this circus. We're all fools in love, looking at the wrong things. But if we can learn to balance our minds and our hearts, we might just figure out how to survive it.
It is ultimately a philosophy of grace. Grace for our own foolishness. Grace for the flawed people we love, and grace for the imperfect society we have to navigate.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. Something to really chew on as you go about your day.
Bring it back to the present moment.
We spent a lot of time today talking about how these 19th century women evaluated potential partners based on a strict, seemingly shallow checklist: wealth, age, clothing, inheritance, what diseases they might have.
Right, they did this out of sheer desperation and survival, trapped in a rigid social structure, all while desperately hoping for a spark of real romance underneath it all.
And it is so easy for us to look back from our modern vantage point and judge them for being trapped in that matrix.
Right. We think we are so evolved, we believe we are completely free from those 19th century societal constraints. But I want you to think about how we operate today, right now. You pull out your phone, you open a dating app. What are you doing? You are swiping through thousands of human beings using an exact, rigid, uncompromising checklist.
Height, job title, age range,
Yeah.
aesthetic vibe, geographic radius.
Exactly. We filter by income bracket, by educational background, by political affiliation, by whether they hold a fish in their profile picture.
Yeah.
We apply the most ruthless, calculated algorithmic sense imaginable to the dating pool.
We act exactly like Lucy Steele optimizing an asset.
And yet, after setting all these cold mathematical filters, we are still hoping that this rigid algorithm will somehow magically yield a life-altering, fiery, romantic sensibility.
We want a spreadsheet to generate a soulmate. We want the algorithm to deliver Willoughby's passion with Edward's stability while demanding the financial security of Colonel Brandon.
Are we really any different from Elinor and Marianne sitting in the parlor scoping out the men at Barton Park? Are our modern technological filters just a digital version of Barton Cottage?
That is a terrifying and absolutely perfect question.
Just a little something to think about the next time you swipe left, because someone is an inch too short or makes $10,000 too little. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep seeking the balance. Don't let the algorithm entirely override your heart.
And remember, if you find yourself wandering in the freezing rain looking for a romantic hero, maybe check the weather app first. Use a little sense. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.